The agenda today is pretty straightforward, and I think most of the items should be very familiar to all of us by now. So we look forward to your feedback and direction and the discussion on things of importance. But I wanted to take just a couple minutes and have Eric Brown, our Assistant Public Works Director, come up. As you saw from the emails, we had a pretty serious force main break on a sewer line along the power line trail. This one running west to east, a pressurized line. Pretty substantial break with some pretty significant impacts. And I want Eric to just talk through the great work the crew did and what they had to deal with. And I believe, Eric, that road's back open this morning. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eric.
Thanks, Patrick. Mayor and Council, I just became aware that the email I sent to you at 3 o'clock yesterday just probably hit your boxes this morning. So I'll do a little bit of a recap of that email. As Patrick mentioned, on Tuesday night at about 10 p.m., we became aware of a break with our force main. And I got the phone call at 10:04 from Ken Snow, who was in his truck on his way. That's our wastewater manager, along with a whole bunch of his staff. They quickly turned off that lift station, which, as you're aware, is our wastewater flows by gravity until gravity is no longer economical for us to move that water. So then we have to lift it, and that's what the lift station does, and then we force it by a pressurized pipe to the next spot where we can then drop it by gravity. That pressurized pipe is what ruptured. So we literally had wastewater coming up out of the street and the sidewalk on McQueen Road. So they shut off that lift station, which we can only do for a short period of time before we have wastewater coming out of manholes in other locations upstream, because there is no secondary way for that water to be routed. So our team immediately called our emergency on-call contractors, who brought out 4,000 linear feet of 12-inch pipeline, which is not by accident. It's not a miracle. It was planned. So we have 16 lift stations in Gilbert. They are all different. They have different configurations. They have different size pipe, inlets, outlets. We have 16 different emergency response plans, and our contractor has the parts list for 16 different emergencies. And they literally pulled Chapter 9 Islands Lift Station off the shelf, got the parts, and got out there. And they built almost a mile of pipeline over 18 hours yesterday to bypass that ruptured line. We had to shut down McQueen Road in order to get that pipeline across the road. And like I mentioned, we can't leave that lift station off for 18 hours without water backing up out of the sewer system. So we actually brought out 10 pumper trucks. 4 of them from neighboring communities, Chandler, Queen Creek, and Mesa, all pitched in with their pumper trucks. And we had 6 brought in from contractors. And they ran for 18 hours, sucking water out of manholes, driving it to the wastewater plant and dumping it, and then coming back. That kept service intact for our entire community. Aside from the road closure, there was no disruption in the community. So that was a long day. At 6 p.m., we opened one southbound lane on McQueen and the full northbound side. That one lane will be restricted for a to be determined amount of time, because at this point, all we have done is rerouted and avoided the break in the line. The teams are taking today off. Tomorrow, they will begin investigating the break in the line and working on the actual long-term fix for that. But with that in mind, they also, as of 9 a.m. yesterday morning, had already sourced 800 linear feet of slip line in Kingman, and it was on a truck on its way down to us, because they believe that that will be a medium-term solution for that pipeline. So the team just showed an incredible amount of competency yesterday, and I want to make sure we said that right. Competency in operating and being prepared for an emergency situation and activating those plans. And I think that's just a great way for us to start today. Is there was a potential large outage for a big portion of our community that the team was able to avoid through proper planning and executions of those plans. Sorry that the email didn't get to you. There's some photos in there. we'll have that pipeline out there in the community for quite a while we work on the fix, but it should be a minimal disruption at this point.
Thank you, Eric. I also wanted to note that this pipeline, we do regular assessments of our infrastructure, and this section of line has been slated for a rehabilitation project. It was, I believe, Eric, not the highest rated rehabilitation project of those that we have identified, but it's not an exact science, as Eric mentions in the email that you'll see. And sometimes those assessments still don't identify all the things that may be happening within that pipe. In this case, it was the caustic gas building up that ate into the ductile iron that didn't have the right coating on it and then created a failure in the pipe. But we'll know a lot more once they're able to do a full investigation into that. But the assessments are critical, and sometimes even with the assessments and the identified projects that we try to rank, order, and then bring forward for consideration for funding, sometimes even those don't always get the exact order right. And so we appreciate that these are difficult decisions we make because the pressure it puts on rates and our residents. But it is critical to maintain our infrastructure so that it's in the best possible working condition that it can be. So with that, we'll get the day started. Kelly Fost is up first to give us an update on where we're at on funding levels with the town's pension plans. So question, oh, Kathy.
See if it, can you hear me? Oh, I got my own, I'm so excited. First, I know. Jessica, Eric, and your team, I just don't want this moment to go by not acknowledging that we all acknowledge the hard work. And I just can't imagine the amount of time and effort that your entire team put into this, but also acknowledging the pre-planning that was put into place. And I think that as we talk about infrastructure, and we have in the past, making a lot of these decisions, these are the things that we take for granted every day as citizens of the community. And knowing that your team is there to ensure that service isn't interrupted any more than it has to be, and that you were able to fix it so quickly. I just wanted to make sure we acknowledged it. I guess that's where I'm going. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. All right, Kelly.
Awesome. Best way to start the day, sewer and pensions. It's going to be a good day. Oh, glad to be presenting with you today. I am trying to figure out the level of detail that you want in presentations and the speed. So if you want a different speed of information or detail, just let me know and I can adapt to that. So we'll talk about pensions, and on this side, if I turn it on, it will advance. Yes, thank you. It's always good to have some fun friends. All right, for pension, we're going to do just quick overview of information. We'll talk about PSPRS, which is our public safety retirement system. And then we'll talk about ASRS, which is the civilian employees or most of the employees for the Arizona State Retirement System. A little bit of pension lingo to start with. So in the pension system, there will be assets, which is the money that we use to pay the benefits to the retirees. And then there's the liabilities, which is the cost of those benefits. The difference between assets and liabilities, most of the time, there's less asset than there is liability, and we call that the unfunded liability. That's the gap there. And when we talk about the funded ratio, that's assets divided by liabilities. So in this case, it would be about half as much asset as you need to cover the liabilities. So it would be maybe 50% funded. If it was maybe 3/4, it would be 75% funded. So we're going to talk about funded status several times, and that's what it's referring to. Most of the time, there's just not enough asset for the liability that's planned. Gilbert participates in several different retirement systems. The one on the top here is ASRS, which is the Arizona State Retirement System. Most of our civilian employees are participants in that system. So most of the town employees are here. It is a pooled structure. That means that Gilbert is not the only municipality participating in this system. Several different school districts, state, local governments, counties all participate in this system. All of those that are participating pay the same rate. It doesn't matter which jurisdiction you belong to. That's part of being in a pooled system. And the assets and liabilities are held all together. This system is about 71% funded. Not great, but it's been improving. It's not terrible. The second one is EORP, which is the Elected Officials Retirement System. It's just for elected officials. It is a pooled system, so all the elected officials from any of the jurisdictions participating in this plan pay the same rate. It is about 32% funded, which is abysmal. And they're working on that at state legislature and doing some things. So we'll leave that one for another day. The three bottom ones are PSPRS, Public Safety Retirement System, Public Safety Personnel Retirement System. And you're going to hear about different tiers. 1 and 2 are the ones you're going to hear most common. Those are for employees, police and fire who were hired before July 1, 2017. That system is now closed. Anyone new to public safety is hired into Tier 3, which is the bottom one. Tiers 1 and 2 are separated. Fire is an individual system. Only Gilbert firefighters are in that system. Only Gilbert firefighters pay that rate. The employee side is the same for any firefighters across any of the jurisdictions, but the part that the town pays is different from what Chandler pays, from what Mesa pays. Only in the fire and the police system. Fire is calculated separate from police, but both of them are for Gilbert only for Tier 1 and 2. And then for and they are funded about 90% each. Tier 3 is police and fire together. It's pooled with jurisdictions from across the state. Everyone pays that same rate, and it's about 110% funded. That's higher funding because it's new. It's only been effective since 2017, so it's small. As it grows, as more employees come in, as it gets more experience, that will level out, and they'll work so that that's closer to 100% funding. They had some good years and things happening in there. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about PSPRS. Specifically, PSPRS has had a problem with some funding, that it's been underfunded, and we recognize that at the state level. Gilbert started making efforts to improve our funded status in 2016, and these are the different ideas that we put into place to help improve our funding status. In the 2018 legislative session, the legislature required that we put a formal policy into place. So we just formalized what we had already been working on, put it into our financial policies, and continue to work towards that. Our official target is to be 90% funded in both our police and fire, and as you noticed, we're about there. We actually hit that on the June 30th, 2021 financial report. We hit our target, and so we stopped doing these things because we had met our target. Let's take a look at what that means regionally. So because Gilbert has put a bunch of one-time money towards our unfunded liability in the past years, our unfunded liability is about $32 million, which is down from a high of $61 million in 2016. That's when we really started to make an effort. The two in white, Tempe and Glendale, have unfunded liabilities similar to ours, but that's because they issued pension debt. So on top of paying what they need to for their pension, they will pay principal and interest payments to repay debt. They did about $340 million and $250 million in 2021, so to buy down their unfunded liability. Peoria, Chandler, and Scottsdale, all in the pink, have been working to put cash towards their unfunded liabilities as well. So they're in the 100 to 180 million. Their peaks were in 2019 and 2020. They were a little bit later than us and really getting going at putting their unfunded liability down, but they are making good strides. Yellow and orange, Mesa and Phoenix, if they are making an effort, it is not showing up on their reports. They have not hit a peak of their unfunded liability. It continues to grow each year. So they're at $720 million and $3.5 billion of unfunded liability. So what does that mean for our rates? So the employers will pay a % of the employee's salary into the pension system every year. For Gilbert, we pay in the mid-20 range. So because we put that one-time money into the system, our ongoing cost is now lower. Compared to Tempe and Glendale, they've also put money into the system. They're in the mid-20s, mid to high 20 range. Peoria, Chandler, Scottsdale in the 30 to 58% range. And then Mesa and Phoenix are paying 60 to 80% of the employee salary every year into the pension. So there's a big difference in that ongoing cost for the different municipalities.
Hey, Kelly, could you go back to that slide? And again, I'd just like to emphasize, many of those cities issued pension obligation bonds to buy down their debt. So that cost that they're paying as a percentage of officer salary, there's an actual bond payment with interest on that in addition to that, which Gilbert does not have.
Yes, for Tempe and Glendale, they have that additional cost, which is not represented here. Oh, I haven't, if they did, it's more recent than their last report. They might have in this last 12 months. All right. So the last report that came out, June 30th, 2022, showed that police is 91% funded, fire is 89.4% funded. Altogether, we're at 90%. But because we have dipped below our target of 90%, we need to come to you and ask if you would like to make an additional contribution to help bring that up. With the timing of reports, I think by the time the next report comes out, we will likely be above 90% just naturally with the payments that we're making over this year. But we want to bring that decision to you and have some discussion. If you would like us to put documentation together for a council meeting and do a contingency to send additional money this year, or if you want to let the next report come out and then decide what we want to do at that point. My best guess is it will be above 90% depending on what their rates of return are this year and how much they change in their actuarial assumptions. It also helps us use one-time money to be able to reduce those long-term costs for the town, like we did with PSPRS. The cons are it will not change the contribution rate that's calculated for the system. The whole system is pooled, so it will continue to have the rate that is calculated for everybody. But we could use some of the money to pay a portion of our amount. Pre-funded amounts can never be returned to the town, so we make it. That's a decision that can't be undone. The town may have other priorities or needs for the funds, like we talked about with the PSPRS side, but pre-funding will not officially reduce our OPEB liability or the post, how can help me out, OPEB, post-employment benefit. Can't remember the O, which is about the $90 million, but the assets would also be recorded. So it balances, it just doesn't officially reduce the OPEB liability. Questions and comments and direction on this?
Thank you. All right, I was working on my Seinfeld impression, but I'm going to spare you all. We're trying to catch up on time anyways. But what is the deal with credit card fees? So again, what are we talking about? Transaction fees. So right now, what I'm trying to focus on is the credit card fee themselves and why. As we see inflation pressures, we'll get into some more of what that impact is having on our different or our different enterprise funds. But these are fees paid to credit card companies. Not everyone uses a credit card. And so when the town pays for these fees, someone who uses a card and gets mileage or points or cash back, they are benefiting, but we're spreading the cost of that to everyone, right? And so that's kind of why we're here today. And so what we're not talking about is the cost to receive payments online. That's kind of a cost to do business. That's not going to the credit card companies. It's going to another third-party processor who handles all the security and makes sure things are taken care of in that regard. Why are we talking about it specifically now? Again, with inflation and the costs and pressures on our enterprise funds, the wastewater fees going up and other pressures, we've seen the fees that we pay out increase 75% just over these 3 years. And so we started looking, we want to understand, okay, why? Why are they growing so quickly? Two big things, COVID. We pushed everybody online, which is excellent. Lots of the people that went online now are using credit cards. And so we're getting the online cost of taking that transaction, and then we're paying a fee to the credit card companies also. We also have an auto pay. And about 2 years ago, that vendor added an option to allow auto pay to use a credit card. In the past, it had been only through your checking account, an e-check, an ACH. And so again, we're seeing more and more cost building on that credit card side. So again, just to give you some of the scope of what this means per transaction, fees range between 3% and 4%. You could have two Visa cards from the same bank and they have a different fee. So it's very complex, and honing in on exactly what the amount is something that we would work in on the back end. But if a utility bill is $100, that's $3 or $4 per month. Now we have 90,000 of those every month. So if everyone is using credit cards, this can be a great expense quickly. A residential building permit, $20,000 fee. Now, again, just the credit card portion of that fee might be $600 or $800. Now, it does not cost us that much to process that transaction. So it doesn't make sense for us to pay that much or for everyone to share that cost if not everyone is using and gaining the benefit of the credit card. And again, on the commercial side, it's significant. Some of the history, so we did recognize this in development services. We started taking credit cards. We love ease of use. We love customer experience. We love making things, giving people choices. We, though, just want to be clear on making sure that the public funds that we're receiving are being treated as they should be, and that we're very careful of how we handle those funds. And so we saw people starting to use credit cards in this development service area. And as you could see, those permit fees are quite high. It might cost us $3, $4, $5 to process a transaction. But if we're paying a credit card company $600, $700, $800 or several $1,000s, that's a big mismatch. And so staff came to council and council approved adding on a pass-through fee to kind of recover. So we could still give people options, but eyes wide open. If you would like to use a credit card, that's fine. Here's the fee associated with that. And in this case, also, we saw those transaction fees where the being able to pay online is a convenience. And if you wanted to do that, again, there are other ways that we could do this at no cost or low cost to the town. If you want to use a more expensive way, you can pay for that privilege. But there are other ways around that that are still convenient. The area's impact, so again, we started at 2.75%, and then recently we've gone up to 4%, and then every year if that changes, staff comes to council and says, hey, here's the fee. We're not allowed to make a profit, so it really is just a cost recovery aspect, and so we have to be very careful and make sure that we're not making 10 cents, when we add everything up. So we've already done this with planning, building safety, business licensing, permits, plan review, inspections. We're just proposing to look more broadly on the whole town. So again, we've already done it, permits licensing. We would like to bring this and have council consider adding a pass-through fee for utility billing, but also in parks and recreation, clerk's office, police, fire, ambulance, and courts. And we would do this kind of one at a time as we roll out and kind of make sure that the systems in place are set up in a way that we're able to do this. And again, the whole process behind this is incredible inflation pressures, and we're trying to allow people to have choices, but when that expense is not shared equally among the users, that's where we want to try and find some parity. So we would recommend, so looking for some guidance to bring forward a resolution to allow a credit card transaction fee across all lines of service, not just what already exists in permitting, up to 4%. We would come back with a specific number that is less than 4% each year. Continue to focus on customer experience and providing those options. We love the modern world in which we live. We want to keep all those. But we also want to do what we can to help these enterprise funds that are seeing so much inflation pressure, or if we can recover some of these fees, it's going to be significant. And then the financial impact, we're looking probably in between $500,000 and $1 million in fees paid. And so again, people could shift the way that they pay to a process that doesn't incur an extra credit card fee. Whether they're putting in their checking account, an ACH, an e-check. There are other ways to do that, a debit card. That would save the town quite a bit of money in terms of what we're spending right now. So that's the ask. Trying to catch up a little on time, but happy to take the time to answer any questions, concerns, thoughts.
Yeah, I think Patrick pays his utility bills in gold doubloons. Is that? All right. Am I starting? Okay. Well, good to be with you all again. We're going to try to take you through this with a pretty quick summary so that we've got some time for questions. I know that there were some questions and some discussion points last time around, so we wanted to make sure we reserve some time for that. But back here with you again, if you'll recall last retreat, we gave you some updates around the recruitment retention efforts, some of the progress that's been made, and so we thought we'd kind of lead with the really good news, in my opinion, which is the turnover and vacancy data, and just a continued update in that regard. So you'll remember I talked about this trend line. This is a rolling 12-month trend on the turnover data at the top of the screen. And that is really good to see now that that is in a continued decline, because what that means is month over month, we continue to see less and less turnover that's really been in place for the better part of a year now, which is a great thing to see. Another way to kind of view that, again, if you'll recall, we've got our all turnover data at the top in the blue bars, and then at the bottom there is the non-retirement, right? So that would be any turnover that is separations, voluntary, involuntary, that are not at a retirement stage. But both of those lines continue to see a really nice down trend, and you can look here most recently at January 2023 data. Some of our lowest turnover we've seen in a matter of a couple of years now. And then the orange box there is just to give you another kind of nice nugget of data. You'll see, as I mentioned last retreat, in FY22, we saw 180 employees leave the organization, and we hired about 213. This year so far for FY23, we've seen 119 leave the organization. We've hired 223. So we continue to shrink that vacancy space with some amazing recruitment effort, obviously from the people team, but also through department support and working hard to get those filled. So again, this is the same data you saw last time, and I'll add to it here in a second. January 2022, things looked pretty concerning, right? And this was during kind of on the tail end of what everybody was calling the Great Resignation. We were up to about 9.5% vacancy, so close to 10% of our positions in the town were open. That jumped up to even higher, to 11% in February. We saw a big decline over the months that followed, and in November, when we presented this data to you, we were down to 6.5%. And the great news is we're now down to 5%. So only 5% of positions in the town are vacant. And that's a pretty kind of natural state number, right? It's hard to get much lower than that, because we're going to see people naturally transitioning out, and there's a time to fill that takes place. So we're always going to have a certain percentage of vacancy just as we're recruiting to fill positions. I think Dawn's going to take us through this part.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. So I'm going to take you through and just remind you a little bit about the retention and recruitment working group that we have instituted within the town. If you recall, we put together this working group so that we could hear and understand what's happening within the organization and what things we might look at to try and address some of the recruitment and retention challenges that we were having. So this group has been working on the phase 1 initiatives for a little bit now. Those, just to remind you what those are, really looking at our better education around our pay for performance philosophy, addressing burnout, educating staff on the benchmarking process, creating a mentorship program, leveraging cross-functional teams, and then professional development program expansion. So the teams have done the initial kind of look at these programs and really started to dig in, and are just digging deeper right now to really look at what could these entail, what would be the challenges, what would be the benefits, kind of who it would impact, and just all of those things. And so we're really proud of the work that they're doing. And so wanted to just really touch on why these initiatives are impactful, the things that we believe these initiatives will do, and why they were highlighted. So really, we're looking at ensuring that there is better pay transparency, so people really understand what our programs include and that type of thing throughout the town. Really looking at employee well-being. So burnout was on that list as well. It's a real thing, and we recognize that. And so really focusing on that employee well-being. We also believe that these initiatives and different things that we're looking at will increase employee skills, upskilling, reskilling, that type of thing, and then also provide some organizational efficiency. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Nathan so he can talk about some of our other market-driven analysis.
I'm so tempted to say we should give Dawn a round of applause, but so yeah, you'll recall this information that we presented to you last time around, and the difference now is we've been able to go and do some research on some of these items, a little further along in the research, and some that's kind of easier data to come by versus some others that we're still doing a review of. But you'll recall there was a discussion around a neighboring jurisdiction that announced a relaunch of their post-retirement health insurance program. And so we wanted to make sure we did a thorough analysis of kind of the viability of that for Gilbert. And that included working with our actuary to make sure we got good estimates and good data. Deferred compensation contributions. So there are a number of cities and municipalities out there that have some sort of employer contribution to deferred comp, or some kind of future money, right, for retirement to assist in retirement needs. So we started doing some research there. Paid family leave. We've talked about this before. We rolled out paid parental leave a few years back, and that's been just an incredible benefit to our employees that we hear constant appreciation that we offer some form of paid parental leave. We wanted to look at a broader family leave program that includes kind of all stages of life. And then lastly, pay practices for sworn and non-sworn personnel. And this is just ensuring that we do an assessment of what's called our STEP program, right, which is how our sworn personnel see pay growth year after year, versus our pay for performance or our range process that exists for most of our non-sworn. So to kind of take you through these piece by piece, so for paid post-retirement, I'm going to blow your minds with a lot of data on the screen here, but I'm going to try to highlight what matters for the purposes of the discussion here. So we got our actuarial study. They gave us a lot of numbers on paper, and the gist is that if you kind of look at these two, the left side blue column going down is kind of current payments or contributions that we are responsible for to cover any sort of retiree plans or health needs now. You can see that those remain fairly unchanged, and this is through 2047. So, somewhere in the $160,000 to $130,000 ballpark as far as our immediate sort of cash need. But you can see on the column to the right, this is based on if we rolled out an employer-paid insurance program for our retirees. You can see that number grows to over $6 million. And this, again, is just the kind of cash component. I'm going to show you some other maybe shocking pieces here in a second. Yeah, so you can see the column to the far right, the blue column. I'm going to show you the difference. So this is the OPEB liability. So this is what we have to be on the hook for and prepared in a worst case scenario to fund for our retirement program. Right now, that hovers between 2.7 million to about 1.2 million. That would grow to about $250 million if we were to roll out a program where we pay the health benefits for retirees. Yeah, go for it.
Something to note on this, if this isn't a large enough number for you, is that it would just be specific to this program. So that's separate and above and beyond what Kelly mentioned. The organization already has is our OPEB liability. Just for reference, the neighboring jurisdiction that we looked at that is offering this program, their current OPEB for non-public safety is in the neighborhood of about $1 billion. So there are real and financial obligations that come with exploring this kind of program.
So
Yeah, and this is where oh, sorry.
never heard OPEB before, so I just looked it up because even Kelly stumbled on what it is. Other post-employment benefits.
Perfect, yep.
Thank you, sorry, because I've never heard you guys mention this before, so. thank
Yeah, I appreciate you looking it up because all I know to say is OPEB. Well, and I was going to say I will look for a nod from Kelly, but to that point, this affects our credit, our ability to issue bonds and things of that nature. There's a lot to this because it has to do with our overall kind of financial liabilities, right? Yeah.
Towards the benefit itself. And then there's the additional liability that comes with future costs, how funded your plan is or not. And that's what just continues to grow quite rapidly when exploring this type of program.
Yeah, you can almost think of those two things like if you have auto insurance versus if you decide you want to self-insure for your car. If you want to self-insure for your car, the state of Arizona would say, okay, well, you need to have about $500,000 in the bank to cover medical, to cover all the things that could occur if you were in an accident, right? So nobody does that, right? Maybe you do. I don't know. Good for you.
Or Mary, so the only other agency in the region offering post-retirement health insurance is Mesa. Do we know what their OPEB is right now currently?
That's what Mary was just referencing.
Sorry.
We weren't naming names, Patrick.
Thank you, Mary.
I believe, so anybody can go look at their certified annual financial report. And if you look at their OPEB liability from their latest one, and I by no means am an expert in their jurisdiction, so I would encourage anybody to just go look and review. But I believe overall their OPEB liability is in the neighborhood of around 2 billion. And I think specific to this offering, I'm sure that there are other details to be considered, but specific to the non-public safety portion, it's around $1 billion. Kelly, is that your recollection? Yeah. So they're out there. If you go look at a certified annual financial report, you can see, just do a quick search for OPEB. It's something that every jurisdiction has a post-employment benefit obligation, every single one of us. Ours is right around 92 million, I think, is what you said. Mostly with our retirement system. So there's multiple components that go into that. But whenever you're looking at adding a benefit program that's for a post-retirement benefit program. So for instance, in Gilbert, just to clarify, our retirees right now are able to stay on our plan, but they stay on our plan paying 120% of whatever the current employee rate or the total benefit rate is, total premium is for the town, 125%. Thank you, Nathan. So they're able to still access our benefits, continue with their network, but they pay the total cost of that premium, whereas our active employees pay about an 80-20 split based on one of the plans, and then that kind of cascades to other plans depending on the benefits that one of the, I think, is it 3 plans that they choose?
No, 2.
2 now. There were 3 at one point. Yeah. But so that's what that benefit, the current benefit payment plan is. This would be looking at going above and beyond and having the town offer the same benefit premium offering to retirees as opposed to them picking up 100% of the cost. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, so I'll just highlight the one point Mary made there. We do offer post-retiree benefits. It's just at a much higher premium. And it's, if you look at it, marketplace comparisons, it's still pretty competitive with what's out there via ACA, things of that nature. So the gist is we don't necessarily believe this is financially viable for Gilbert, at least at this time. We are looking, though, at some other programs that could help assist, reduce, supplement the kind of planning and managing process for post-retirement. So, just as some ideas that we're investigating, things like retirement health savings accounts, things of that nature that maybe we could assist or add some contributions to. The good thing about those is they don't create any added liability for us other than the money that's allocated to it, whereas obviously covering health programs, there's a lot of additional liability beyond just the premiums and the costs that go in up front.
One of the things that we've talked about is would it make sense, obviously, when a lot of retirees look at Medicare supplement plans. So would it make sense for us to offer something where they can save up some money to help pay for those supplemental expenses and or their contribution towards staying on the town plan until they're 65, I believe. So.
Yeah.
Nathan, before you move on, since you have several things,
Yeah.
can we do Q&A right now for this part? I think
Sure.
it'll probably be easier to track
Sure.
for everybody. Vice Mayor?
As a way to sort of supplement or augment retirement. As you know, with ASRS and PSPRS, it does not typically cover your full earnings at retirement anymore. It used to way back when, but that's not how it works today. And so a lot of, we have a deferred compensation program here in Gilbert that is fully on the obligation is fully placed on the employee. If they want to put money into that, the fees for the vendor that we use are passed on to the employee. Everything is kind of managed directly through the employee. We did some analysis in the marketplace, and we looked specifically at our benchmark cities. So we found that 8 out of 11 of our benchmark cities do offer some sort of employer contribution into a deferred comp program. So of these 8 cities that do offer this benefit, 7 of those offer it across the board. So only one of those 8 offers it for sworn personnel specifically. So we believe if we were going to be competitive in this arena amongst the marketplace, we would want to look at an employer contribution that covers all employees within deferred comp. 6 of those 8 cities do require an employee contribution in order for there to be an employer contribution. So you can think of this in the private sector like a 401k, where the company might match your contributions into your 401k up to a certain limit. That would be a model we would want to follow here. We would probably look to kind of keep up with what's going on in the market. It's something in the ballpark of 2 to 3% match that we're willing to contribute. And we would really, the ask today is just that we continue to investigate the kind of cost implications and the impacts that would be associated with this if the council is supportive of us continuing to do that research. So.
And the one thing I'll add about kind of why we may be looking at these programs, I know our turnover is really low at this point, but when we talk about recruitment and retention, it is always a moving target. And so we always want to look out to the market and say, what are people offering? What are things that we could offer not only to retain our employees, but also to attract other employees? And so that's how and why some of these programs have come up and why we would kind of look to the market and say, are we being competitive and do we need to be more competitive and what do we need to do? So that's part of why we're doing that.
I would just offer too that especially when we attract employees from the private sector coming over, ASRS, PSPRS is an entirely new concept for them. And at first it's, around 12% of your paycheck. What do you mean that gets taken out without an option for me to elect or not elect? Once they get over that hump coming onto the organization, obviously that's a great benefit to them long term that they're able to participate in the retirement program. But something like a 457B offers something that's much more similar to a 401k, like Nathan described, where the employee has more control over what to do with those funds. Because once it's in the ASRS fund, it's not something that I have the ability to go in and manage my funds, plan for my it's something that gets slated away, and obviously is a great benefit to employees if they're able to stay in the system for the entirety or close to whatever portion of their career they're able to. But the 457B really offers that opportunity for employee control of saving for retirement, being able to manage their funds and everything else. And so that's something that we look at competitively when we see that most of our peer jurisdictions are offering something in this space. We currently have a deferred comp, but we don't offer any sort of matching component. And so that's something that historically we've heard quite a few times from employees looking to see if there ever would be an opportunity for the town to offer a match.
Thank you. I just realized we're all wearing boots. And then the pay practice component is really we're still kind of in research phase for this, but I just wanted to give a few highlights so that you understand kind of the differentiation that exists today. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mary.
Can we stop in between and let us comment?
Oh, of
on
course,
each
yes.
Separate section, because I think it's easier than trying to move
Absolutely.
forward and forget.
So the only other thing I would add is just related to kind of the plans. We do go out for bid on the plans and competitively bid them. So the fees are something that we could certainly kind of look at throughout that bid process and sort of figure out how to make sure those plans are the most competitive they can be and beneficial for employees.
I'm sure you guys
So the pay practices component, I just wanted to kind of bring you all up to speed a little bit on how this sort of structured today, and then speak to some of the things we're gonna research further, because we want to make sure that we've got programs in place that meet the needs, again, that address retention and recruitment efforts across all parts of the organization. So first and foremost, our process as it stands today is our non-sworn personnel, right, which is somewhere in the ballpark of 65-70% of the organization, is on a pay for performance and a merit matrix model. So that model, as some of you may have seen, typically fluctuates with market conditions, with funds and all of these things year to year. And then our sworn personnel are on a 5% annual process through our STEP program. There's kind of two terms that exist out there. There's the top out versus the idea of being at max. Top out means you've got steps, right? Maybe as a patrol officer, you have 7 steps. And once you get to step 7, you're topped out until you either promote or the ranges move with benchmarking. Being at max, right? You have a salary range for non-sworn positions, and at max means you are at the top of that range, and therefore you are not eligible for annual increases in salary unless the range moves. And then just generally, just again to make sure we're all on the same page, Gilbert benchmarks every position in the town every 2 years. So this is a pretty lofty effort we undertake. Most organizations do. Some of them manage about a 3-year cycle. Some of them do class and comp studies, and that could be every 5 to 7 years. And then they may just do sort of manual shifts or adjustments through cost of living increases and things like that to move ranges on a more consistent basis. But oftentimes what you see when they hire out those class and comp studies, there's a lot of catching up that has to take place because they haven't been keeping as close a watch on the market. We're really proud of our every other year benchmarking process, because that means we've got real-time, researched analysis of all positions in the town on a 2-year cycle. And so that's kind of just the breakdown of things. Sorry, I didn't mean to proceed past that. So we are, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. If I don't ask it, I'm going to keep thinking it and I won't hear everything you're saying. So when you say you've reached the max, that means you wouldn't get a raise within that limit, but you still get your cost of living increases, or you get nothing at that point. You stay at that max.
So if you're at max, you get what we call a lump sum payout. So if it's pay for performance time and you're at the max of your range, instead of increasing your salary, you get a lump sum. So that means you get a payout that would be equivalent to that raise that year. The next year, your pay is still the same that it was last year, though. If there's a cost of living adjustment, which we don't typically do cost of living adjustment, last year we got council's approval for the inflationary adjustment. We did not move ranges. So that meant that our non-sworn personnel got a lump sum if they were maxed out for that cost of living adjustment, whereas our folks in sworn, the steps were moved to accommodate that adjustment, if that makes sense.
Can I just restate it to see if I understood? So even though their pay is, I'll just say, frozen at that point, they still receive money. They receive a one-time payment, which actually is like a salary increase. It just isn't considered going above the maximum amount.
Yeah, it's right. And it's just not incremental, meaning it's not going to affect them next year. So if I make $50,000 and that's the max, and I get a 5% raise, I'll get that, correct me if I'm wrong, $2,500, right? Yeah. That $2,500 lump sum payment, right. But my salary is still $50,000 going into next year.
So anything considered for the future is
right.
Be at 25.
And that's one of the variables we're researching right now, because as you may know, our sworn personnel, when they are at the max of their steps, there isn't a lump sum model that exists today. And some of this is a factor of, I think we rolled out a pay for performance model a number of years ago within the organization. it was believed at the time and still believed today that that model doesn't work within our sworn positions because everyone else in the market uses a step system, and we need to make sure we can compete and we can effectively recruit. And so as a result of that, we have this kind of traditional step program. We want to look and see if there's a more creative, more employee-focused approach to the step model. So there's a lot of things we're researching to see what solutions might exist out there.
So there are multiple layers to this conversation. And at a high level, if you think about it with the two different plans, STEP offers, typically there's about 7 steps, I believe, depending on the position on the PD side.
It gets to be less as you go up. So sergeants, lieutenants, they have fewer steps.
So they progress through those steps based on years of service. And then once they reach that final step, they're topped out. What is different about their plan is when the benchmarking occurs every 2 years, all of the people, regardless of what step they're in, move with the benchmarking. On the non-sworn side, when we do benchmarking every 2 years, they don't move with the benchmarking unless they're outside of a kind of market tolerance that's currently set at 12%. So oftentimes for non-sworn employees, when benchmarking is completed, they don't see any movement to their salary based on benchmarking changes. The goal with pay for performance and the merit matrix is to help keep them current with the market through those annual adjustments. So non-sworn has available to them, if they're at the max of their range, a one-time payment that would come with pay for performance. Currently, sworn does not have that accessible to them when they're topped out at the top of their steps. They do not receive a one-time payment. Rather, they move through the benchmarking process every 2 years. So one of the considerations that we're talking about as an organization is, number one, are there any opportunities to look at both of those to make sure that we have consistency where possible and have more of an equilibrium between the two? And number two, would it make sense to explore a one-time payment that would be accessible to public safety? If we do that, are there any considerations on the non-sworn side we need to look at? For instance, that 12%. Is that 12% an appropriate market tolerance for us to either move or not move employees based on how their benchmarking comes back? So there's a variety of factors, and we were trying to keep it somewhat high level because it is so nuanced and layered. But overall, the goal is for us to be able to do a review of where there might be opportunities for better synergy between the two programs and opportunities to make sure that we are, number one, that employees understand what's available to them. Number two, that we're staying competitive with the market and what other agencies are offering. And number three, that we're able to offer consistent benefits where possible across the organization. Does that help clarify? Okay.
All right. Anything else in that space? Okay. So then the paid family leave program, we've sort of put this on hold for the time being, and may want to bring it back for future discussion. But the data that I can provide you right now is through our analysis with benchmark cities. To the best of our knowledge, Gilbert is the only city that is offering currently a paid parental leave program, which is exciting. We're glad to know that we're leading on that. Now, there is one caveat to that, which is Tempe is the only city that is doing a broader paid family leave program. So Tempe does offer all eligible FMLA events. They have a paid program for employees that is equal to the amount of time off, the paid time off that we offer for new parents. But as far as we know, it's just us in Tempe right now that are kind of in this arena. So we want to continue to research this and kind of watch what's going on in the market. We're very proud of our paid family or parental leave program. We were really proud when we rolled it out. We continue to be proud of it. But certainly open to continuing to look at things and assess what might be best for Gilbert long term.
Any comments or questions?
Oh yeah, so I'll pause there for any questions in that area. And we'd like to continue to explore the sworn and non-sworn pay programs within Gilbert and make sure, as Mary said, that they are current, that they are doing the best we can possibly do for all of our employees across the organization wherever it makes sense. We do not recommend the employer-paid post-retirement health plan, but again, we will continue to research other possible scenarios to help offset or supplement those costs. And then we'd like to table the paid parental leave and maybe come back to that in a future retreat conversation once we've been able to gather a little bit more data as far as cost and impacts and things are concerned. And then obviously anything that we are looking at, especially those things that have a policy or a budgetary impact, we make sure we will look at those collectively, right? To look at how does this affect, we kind of look at all these things in a sort of larger bucket when it comes to payroll cost and compensation factors and benefit costs. And so looking at that to make sure that it works within the framework that we have in place to ensure that budget needs are met, and then obviously bringing that to all of you for consideration. So thoughts, yeah. Oh,
Go ahead and slide. Can you,
your lingering questions. So, yeah, you know, Dawn mentioned this when she talked about the phase one initiatives and the kind of purpose behind it, right? It is absolutely important that we continue to hire the best. I think when we hear the stories about the force main break and everyone getting on the scene as quickly as possible and people working outside hours to take care of these things, and our public safety professionals that are out there in the streets every day, it's really important. Obviously, it is my top priority that we continue to hire and retain the best possible talent out there. And there's so many factors, right? So we have to be mindful of the economy, and just like the economy, the labor market continues to experience a lot of transition. And this is difficult. I mean, we saw during the pandemic, it wasn't just suddenly people went remote and that was a thing that happened, but it has changed the way, the perception that exists out there as to how work should or can be done, right? There's so many variables like that we've seen. And we continue to see changes in technology. We see changes in work-life balance needs or flexibility needs, education trends changing. We're seeing less people going and getting 4-year degrees these days and more people that want to get certifications. There's a big push out there across the nation to push people into the trades, right, to get people back to getting trade certifications. And so we have to be mindful of these things as well and continue to reassess how do we recruit for the future. And we're looking, as Mary kind of mentioned, you know, we're looking at things like broadening internship opportunities so we can introduce more young professionals, more aspiring professionals into government to see that it's a great place to work, because if you survey most up and coming soon to be college graduates these days, government work is not on their list of things they want to do. And so we're really trying to think creatively, how do we attract people to come and work for Gilbert so that we're building a workforce of the future, as well as continuing to take care of the historical and institutional knowledge that exists with our current people within the organization. So I think that is it now, right? Okay.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Like you said, I'm not Robert Camorna. You're not Chief Solberg. You got the backups today, but Brock Purdy started the season as a backup and he did pretty well. So I'm using that as motivation to come through for you guys. So Facilities Master Plan and Space Needs Assessment. We're gonna run through that project that's getting ready to kick off, so you guys have some familiarity with it. So the purpose of the project, we want a facilities master plan and space needs assessment that's going to help us basically plan for the future. It'll serve as a guiding document so we can have a safe and inviting work environment, and then be able to meet all the needs of our departments and also the citizens that visit our facilities. So as we go through this process, we have some essential components that we want to hit. First off is we have some previous assessments. We've assessed some of our buildings and facilities, but they've all been usually one-offs here and there, and they've been at different times. We've never done one comprehensive study. So it is good data. It is good things we learn from, but we want to make sure we're taking that and incorporating this in a new space needs assessment. Also conditional assessments. So go out, see what's going on in our facilities and buildings, really get an idea of what conditions they're in, see what project problems could be coming up and what projects will be necessitated from those problems. Then space and programming needs. realistically, we need to see, we got to plan for that future growth. What are we going to need workstation size today and also in the future? Talk to department heads, talk to people, see where they're going to grow, see where we can maybe shift some things around, but really find out what those space needs are. Eventually, that'll become our facilities master plan, guided by those principles. How we're going to get there is through some comprehensive documentation, have meetings, public outreach, things like that. Really find out what we can and work with our contractors who selected to facilitate those things. And like I said, extensive outreach and communication. It's going to impact every department head we have in here, also the citizens that use the facility. So we have to have lots of stakeholder input to make sure we put forth the best possible document. All right, so some of our guiding principles as we go through this is resiliency and sustainability. We want to make sure if we're investing public funds, it's going to be in buildings and facilities that are going to be resilient and sustainable. We have a limited amount of funds, so part of it's going to be cost reasonableness. We want to make sure we're using our limited resources in the most effective way possible and using it wisely in the right and correct order. Energy efficiency and potential reductions in energy. So any way we can save those ongoing expenses and have a good strategy moving forward on some of those things we can possibly reduce. That would be one of our guiding principles as well. Following industry best practices. So if we install a new air handler unit and there's a certain maintenance plan, we'll get it the most lifespan out of it. We want to incorporate that in this plan so our facility techs will know how to take care of those items. So hopefully we can extend those lifespans as long as possible and get the most bang for our buck on what we made in some of those investments, things like that. And then also safety. Safety is also a big component. We want to make sure we have safe facilities people feel comfortable working in and our citizens can comfortably come and visit and feel safe and secure. So I guess this is more the necessity of it. So about 20 to 30 years ago, a lot of our buildings and facilities, they opened around the same time. So now they're starting to get older. Those life cycles are starting to progress. So we really need a plan to make sure that they stay open and they stay accessible. You know, that the age-old saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So we want to make sure we have a plan in place as these buildings start getting older, that we can make sure they stay open and service the communities. Funding considerations, we want to make sure things are spread out so they can be, you know, balanced correctly. We don't want to be hit with a lot of bills because we maybe deferred maintenance too long on too many things. We want to make sure we have a strategy to do things correctly and stay on top of our budgets. This also all feeds into the capital improvement plan, which mayor and council always adopts. So capital improvement has lots of stakeholders, lots of departments, lots of coordination. So we want to make sure that this plan can go and support that capital improvement plan and also help plan those funding mechanisms out. Flexibility too. I think we all kind of thought work was one way, 8 to 5 pre-pandemic, and then we found out that there is more flexibility. We're kind of forced into it, and we want to take that into account as what we can have flexible workspaces in the future to make sure we can have the most efficient possible work style. We've talked a lot about facilities, but this plan will really be more than just facilities. Data and communication spaces. 50 years ago, you probably didn't plan on having a data hub in every building for your network systems and IT. Now that's probably one of your most critical rooms in the whole building. So what's that going to look like 20, 30 years down the line? And we can have a plan to have those type of things in place. Identify and provide any solutions to security concerns. We want to make sure everything's safe, secure. Part of that is our entry points, have a plan that outlines all those in one place so we can stay on top of those things and avoid any potential issues in the future. On-site storage. We never have enough storage. We continue to grow, continue to offer new things, and we never have our storage keep up with it. So actually having a part of this plan, a storage plan in place to make sure we can stay up with that growth, because our closets where we keep jamming boxes in of old files just keeps, getting smaller and smaller, and we definitely need to have a plan for our storage needs moving forward. Vehicle and bicycle. We got to get people to and from the facility. So what does that look like for the future of vehicles? A lot of people use bicycles. So how are we going to make sure we have a plan to accommodate all those different things? Public accessibility. We want to make sure our buildings are obviously open to the public and accessible. A lot of our buildings are used for many different types of public meetings. So we want to make sure we can keep offering those services to the community. And then security camera mapping. Our security cameras have really evolved over time. They cover different areas. We want to make sure that there's a plan in place that we're getting everything we need to taken care of and really having a good mapped out plan for what we need to cover security wise. All right, so I mentioned previously there was some previous assessments done, and what those kind of fed into was the long-range infrastructure plan, which we always call LRIP. So back in 19 and 20, we did some assessments and started analyzing this LRIP plan and what it looked like moving forward. A big part of that LRIP plan was this facility condition index. So basically what FCI is your renewal and repair costs over your replacement costs for a facility or a project in a facility. So there's a different range for what your FCI comes into. So your good range, if you can keep the number under 5%, you know, hopefully you're maintaining things, you don't have big project expenses. It outpaces the overall value of that facility. So if you can keep it under 5%, you're in a good range. That 5 to 10%, you're still in a fair range. If that number starts to creep up, you keep deferring projects, you keep deferring things, it can creep up to over 30%. Then you're going to hit critical range with some of your facilities. And you have some probably tough decisions to make on whether you rebuild something or you maybe have to completely replace something. So looking at FCI, originally it was something that was unfunded before LRIP, and everything right now in the town of Gilbert was still in that good range in 2020. We were good. We were at that 4%. FCI was good. We had to make, you know, minimal investments to keep our facilities open and nice, but as time progresses, we realized we were probably going to hit a critical range around 2029 with some of these life cycle things that were going to come up, some of our bigger systems, you know, air handler systems, HVAC systems, plumbing, electrical, foundations, trending in that way if we didn't fund and do some of these kind of maintenance tasks along the way. So using that data, we did some initial funding, got about 1.76 to fund that LRIP program. And that basically bought us 3 years with that minimal funding, $1.76 million. It's a lot of money, but when you look at the total cost of these big, large facilities, that's a drop in the bucket is what it would be compared to, you know, rebuilding an entire building. So investing it that much definitely bought us some time, but we took that data and looked at it a little further and realized we probably need another 7.3 million annually for that LRIP funding to keep our buildings all at that good level. So everything can stay open, everything can stay accessible, and we can keep offering the services we offer. So knowing this data and kind of the initial work we've done for it, we want to incorporate that in the facilities master plan and space needs assessment. So our main objectives, facility conditional assessments they'll help us out with, the space and programming needs assessment, and then eventually that townwide facilities master plan. Those facility condition assessments, it's basically going to be the baseline for all of our town facilities. One thing we have been doing is when we have new facilities come on board, like the public safety training facility, it does get entered into a system with all those life cycles for all the components. So we have started adding facilities already. It's just some of those older 20 to 30-year-old ones, we haven't done that. So this will kind of get everything up to speed and all on the same page. But we'll inspect the physical and structural conditions, also look at all those mechanical systems. We've got to identify and detect any deficiencies we see that could become problems later on down the road, and look at those life cycles. You know, how long are our components that are on the roof that are big, you know, chiller units? What's the life cycle of that? Let's document it, that we can plan, space things out accordingly. Look at what major repair and replacement costs will be for projects like that. And then as we kind of identify these things, we'll be able to do some cost estimate for major repairs and then timeline things out with repairs and life cycle lengths and kind of come up with a comprehensive plan so we know we have a plan for the future. That space and programming needs assessment. So it's really going to take a lot of time just meeting with department leaders, meeting with council, things like that, and talk about what do we need now, what do we need in the future. Let's identify things that are definitely going to be something we need to keep the doors open. What can we do to have the most efficient work style? Assess and document all those meetings with all of our stakeholders. Talk about what will make us work the most efficiently as possible. See if there's any alternate layouts. Maybe there's two departments that would work really well next to each other because now the current work style is they interact a lot. So we can look and strategize some of those things. Plan for those types of things, being critical agencies, desired support areas. Maybe we have a new service we're going to offer coming online, maybe down the road. We want to have a plan for that. How's it going to impact our staff and how will it impact the public? Let's have a plan for things like that. And then also what department security and concerns and needs look like. Then the facilities master plan, it'll be able to strategize and gain consensus among all the town departments. So we all have one plan that we're all on board with, anticipate things that we could see coming in the future. And then it'll help us develop short, midterm, long-range goals and plans, and then give us some preliminary project budgets and work schedules. Timeline, so they recently released the RFP in February, and they're reviewing it in March. Hope to have a contract to council in May for your review. Then hopefully a project kicked off right after that in June. Be about a 12-month process. There'll be multiple checkpoints along the way. So everybody, obviously a lot of coordination, a lot of meetings, but checkpoints along the way till we can get to that final document. What we're hoping to result in is a well-executed space needs assessment and a facility master plan that facilitates the establishment of long-term goals, shared goals, aligning our business practices. We want to have efficient planning, so we're using money as wisely as possible, and make sure our decision-making and everything is in line, and that our organization has buy-in. We're all on the same page moving forward. At that point, I'll pause, take any questions and feedback.
Thanks for stepping in today, Rocky.
All right, so if Rocky is Brock Purdy from the Niners, I'm kind of more like that field goal kicker for the Cowboys that missed like 4 extra points. So, yeah, but I'll do my best. That was great. I'm great. So I'm going to talk about up in this upper left-hand corner, the MF 2460 PD space needs assessment. So back in 2019, we started to look at a couple of our buildings. We've got 2 police stations. One of them is at Gilbert and Civic Center, and we opened it in 2003. And then we have our Santan substation that's down at Greenfield and Queen Creek, and we opened it in 2007. So if I can put you in a little bit of a time machine right now, I started in 98. Back before 2003, we worked in a couple of, we had a tiny little footprint in what is now Muni 1, and we had a bunch of portables. Trailers, if you will. We didn't have indoor plumbing in the trailers. There were some challenges, as you could imagine. And so when we moved into our public safety center across the street in 2003, we were like, man, we have arrived. We have indoor plumbing. We've got heat. We are set, and we'll never, ever need more space. We went from 1 dispatch console in the little window in what's now Muni 1. And the person would be dispatching, and they would also help you if you came through the door and try to figure out kind of what you needed. And when we moved into our new building, we thought, gosh, we have more than 1 dispatch console. We have an actual detention center. We've got a briefing room. We are good to go. The reality is, at that time, we were also hoping to break 100,000 citizens. We had no hospitals. There was never even a talk about a freeway. And now you can imagine all the growth, and that building in our dispatch area especially has not changed since 2003. And there's a whole heck of a lot more people. Similarly, down in at our Santan station, we're co-located with Public Works down there. So we've got little itty-bitty motorcycles coming in at 5 in the morning along with giant solid waste trucks. And we kind of hopefully don't play chicken, but it's a lot going on down there when we have that many resources co-located. We've outgrown that building. We realize that, or we're shortly about to. We know if we're not looking toward the future, 5-10 years down the road, we probably won't be able to just make it work without at least looking at space needs. We started to look really at our central building, and we started to realize that because we're co-located with courts, at the time with county court and with the city court, and with fire, we didn't know what needs they had. So we were sort of, as a police department, being a little bit myopic, thinking about what we need. But I quickly realized if I was to cut down the wall into Judge Cutchin's courtroom and take over his space, he would probably not be happy about it. So we kind of hit pause in 2019, realizing, kind of like what Rocky's saying, Not only do we need to look at our own buildings and our own space needs, but we probably need to look at everybody else's across the town because we co-locate a lot of our buildings. And if Public Works, for instance, needs more space and we need more space, we can't count on taking over each other's territory. There needs to be a more holistic approach. Of course, in 2019, we were all gung-ho as a town to start this space needs assessment, and then COVID came. And so we had to hit the pause button. And so we've been on pause looking at space needs in public safety since then, and we're starting to move that forward now, starting to take a look at our facilities. Down here, we're talking about the Advocacy Center. This is a center where if a victim is, particularly if they're a victim of a sex crime, we'll end up taking them to an advocacy center. Currently, there's one in Chandler and there's one in Mesa. And the idea behind an advocacy center is if you're a victim of one of these heinous crimes, it's a one-stop shop. I would kind of equate it to, if we were talking about NASCAR, it's like a pit crew. If you're a victim, you go to one place and on a car, maybe they're putting in fuel and washing the windshield and dealing with the tires. It's all done simultaneously. It's kind of the same idea here. Victim receives services. We're able to quickly obtain biological evidence, and we don't end up taking the victim from place to place to place in other cities to get these services performed. And if you can think about going through something like that, it's probably the worst day of your life. Not only do we need to collect evidence quickly, but we try to minimize the amount of time that the victims are going through this process. Speed kind of matters in terms of providing them dignity and getting them back to normal as soon as we can. So Chief Solberg's actually in Texas right now. He's touring a couple different advocacy centers, and we're in the planning stages of talking about what that would look like. Up in the blue, the EOC expansion. EOC stands for Emergency Operations Center. So we currently have one in our main station that we built back in 2003. And I know this is like an overarching theme that I keep repeating, but in 2003, we thought our Emergency Operations Center was good to go. It had old tube TVs and, you know, stuff from that era, kind of smaller. And we're trying to expand that out. We're actually in the middle of that project right now. They're tearing out different walls and reconfiguring part of our public safety building to account for a new EOC. We've used our EOC extensively, like when we do the half marathon, Gilbert Days, when we've had protests. It provides a big building, not unlike this, smaller, but kind of the same idea where you have people from different departments that are co-located and can work through a major problem or disaster together. And lastly, the dispatch expansion. Like I said, in 2003, we moved across the street into the building that we're in now, and we suddenly had multiple dispatch consoles to be able to deal with the population that we had then. As you can imagine, the technology that now goes on inside one of our dispatch centers, we are a far cry from the old days where our dispatchers would fill out a little card when they got a call, and then they'd hand it off to the person next to them and they would dispatch the call. Now it's all automated. They can see where all of our officers are, where all the cars are. It's incredible if you ever have a chance to go in there, but the only problem we have right now is they're really packed. To be able to not only cover all the 911 calls and non-emergency calls that are coming in, but train your replacement, because we're having people finally reaching retirement age. Our dispatch folks they go through training that takes about a year before they can be on their own and master all of that technology and communicate at the same time. So this expansion will be critical, and they're doing that right now. If you go to our main police station, you'll see scaffolding on the outside of the building going upstairs where our dispatch center is. As you can imagine, it's a challenge to run a dispatch center, not turn it off for 1 minute, but have workers constantly doing construction to expand it. So it's a little unique. If you have a chance to check it out, it's interesting. Along the lines of the space needs that we're looking at, when we build an advocacy center, let's say that's done right now, that expansion won't, or that new building won't account for some of the other areas that we're concerned about with regard to our central police station, the one in the picture here. So all of the things that kind of, you can't remote work. You still have to have police officers come in, get in their car. They still have to go to briefing. They have to write reports. They have to arrest people and bring them into the building. It's all of those areas. And then all of the other areas like our locker room, our fitness area, some of those areas are just there to accommodate the human beings that have to come to work every day. Similarly, up here with our criminal investigation section, it would be great if we could move all of our detectives out to an advocacy center, but the reality is, kind of the industry standard is the detectives that deal with persons crimes, either violent crimes or sex offenses, they work out of the advocacy center with those victims and those doctors. And for the detectives that aren't on the persons crime side of the house, they will still be located in our central building. And as we keep growing, we keep adding investigators. They're running out of room. As you can see, conference rooms and then some of our support folks, wellness areas are still going to be an issue we have to find space for. There's little asterisks on two of these, our digital forensics unit and a forensic services section. And the reason there's an asterisk there is if we were to ever build a crime lab in the future, currently we contract with Mesa, but if we ever were to look at that down the road, that would be a possibility to co-locate those folks within a crime lab. That's how other agencies kind of deal with that. Similarly, our Santan substation down here at the South Area Service Center, again, it's co-located with Public Works, but super busy place. The areas that we can't account for by doing the advocacy center or dispatch expansion or expanding our EOC, these are still areas that have been untouched. All of the patrol affected spaces, teleserve, our locker room, our fitness area. We've gotten to a point where as we hire officers, we have to find creative ways to give them things like lockers. We've just run out of them. So we're repurposing rooms that were originally meant for interviews and things like that. Our officers come up to our central building to do those. Those rooms have been turned into makeshift locker rooms so that we can accommodate officers, as we're onboarding them. And I've explained to some of the folks that come down there and look, and they go, well, why do they need a locker? Like, just leave your gym clothes or whatever at home. Like, come on. It's actually for all the gear that we issue them. So their rifles, their mobile data computers, all of that stuff we like to keep secured and locked. It's assigned to them, but they need a space to put it. They don't actually, our hundreds of officers that come in and out every day, no like real estate belongs to them. So everything is shared. That's their one space they can put their stuff and make sure somebody doesn't mess with it. And then again, our traffic section is another group that's down there in our south area, and it's another one that's kind of a challenge between parking, lockers, and then room for our patrol. It's a pretty tight fit. Any questions on the PD side?
Hands would come in handy so I can hold the microphone and the clicker and look at my notes on my computer at the same time. So usually you guys hear a lot more from me at these retreats. You're only going to hear from me twice. I'm just going to ask for all the money in one big lump. So sorry. So I'm here today to talk about water and environmental services, rate study needs and timing, and the pressures that are driving the needs in both of those areas. And so reinvesting in infrastructure, as you know, with the recent failures that we've had, is critical. There's national challenges related to water quality, and everybody's probably familiar at this point. I think we've shown you this slide before, the situation in Jackson, Mississippi, that's a result of years and years of deferred maintenance, deferred capital improvements, a lack of human capital, a lack of investment in the system. And they've had boil water notices for months. And the challenge with that is once you lose that public trust, it's really hard to get it back. And we take that very seriously. When we had the failure on the sewer line just yesterday, Eric mentioned how we had everything we needed in order to be able to, because we had a plan. And this is all part of our plan. And looking long term for the future of the facilities, but also looking at our short-term needs as changing conditions on the Colorado River put additional pressures on our water resource needs. So one of the things that we do try to do is be proactive as best we can. And social media can be kind of nasty sometimes, but we've gotten some really great feedback from residents with some of the recent projects that we've done. We had our condition assessment on our water transmission main on the power line trail, where we identified several areas that were potentially going to fail. We were able to go in and repair those. We were able to get them done a week early, bring that line back up in service. And we got comments like, thanks for all your hard work on getting this done. Grateful to live in a town that takes preventative measures before any ensuing chaos. So we are really trying to maintain our infrastructure and maintain that public trust. So just to kind of set the stage, water and environmental services, you've seen these slides before as well, are enterprise funds. And so all of the rates that are set to run those funds are set to completely be self-sufficient, pay for all the operations, all of the debt service, all of the capital costs. Water doesn't pay for wastewater. Water doesn't pay the general fund. The general fund doesn't contribute to these funds either. They have to be completely self-sustaining. Additionally, we have a minimum unrestricted fund balance that we have to maintain that's set based on the capital that we have, the annual operating cost, 90 days of the annual operating cost plus debt service. So that's where those numbers come from. And those are policies that are set by council that are part of our larger financial policies. So on the rate and fee history side, in the early to late 2000s, we were doing rate increases every year on water, environmental services, and wastewater. And they were anywhere, in the 3 to 10% per year range. And then we had a large gap where we didn't do anything. And we actually decreased our environmental services rate in 2012 because we were getting revenue from a recycling market. And then in 2018, we took a look at everything. So we hadn't done any increases in 9 years. And then even at that point, those rate increases were fairly consistent with what had been done 10 years prior, 11, 12%. We did also decrease our environmental services rate at that time when we established our environmental compliance fund. So then we have a gap of 4 more years and we start to see issues related to COVID and cost escalation and inflation. And we had pretty significant increases on our water and environmental services last year that went into place. And then the rates that you just adopted for wastewater and environmental at the last council meeting. And so the goal is every other year to bring 2 of these funds back to council for review. We'll be talking a little bit more about that after lunch, but just wanted to give you set the history here in terms of in 2022, we were playing catch up for not having done a significant rate increase for many, many years. And now in 2024, we're looking at playing additional catch up when we're talking about all these inflationary costs and then the pressures on the water resources and the needs to meet the water resources needs and related to the cap shortages. So I'm going to start with water. So as I mentioned, we did have an increase in 2022, and as part of the funds that were raised with those increases, we were able to do a lot. We issued a significant water bond through the WRMPC in order to do the North Water Treatment Plant reconstruction, expansion, water quality improvements. That project is up and running, and several of you got to go out and see that a couple weeks ago. We are expecting to bring the next large phase of that project to council in June. We do have the 90% design of that that's been submitted to us for review, and our contractors are actively working on pricing that out now. We were able to complete several large water line replacement projects in our Tankersley areas, as well as a new reservoir site and the transmission main assessment that I mentioned earlier that identified several potential failure locations that we were able to mitigate. And then it did also include a little bit of increase related to our raw water costs that were based on DCP projections, drought contingency plan projections as of 2021, which included a 10% cap rate increase, which we're seeing will be increasing considerably from there. So the old rates did all of that, which is great. But everything that's happened in the last 2 years is now putting pressure on the need for additional rates here. So just to orient you, I know you've all seen these graphs before. The yellow line is the minimum fund balance for the water fund. The blue bar is what the fund balance will be with the proposed rate increase. And the orange bar is what happens if we do nothing. So when we started the FY24 water budget planning process and put everything in that we identified as a need, we saw a need to increase our water rates by 110%. That's a lot. And we said it's not an option. We have to figure out what the truly critical priorities are, and try to phase and space that out. And so what we did is took nearly $190 million and deferred those projects outside of that 5-year window. Most of those coming in this R&R, which is repair and replacement. Deferring those long-term capital projects and needs is not ideal, but we had much more time-sensitive needs related to the water resources that we couldn't defer beyond that 5-year plan. And so those are what's staying in the proposed budget and plan for these rates. They're essential really to providing that uninterrupted water service with the pending cap shortages. And we went through 10 different versions of this budget to get to where we are now. It was a very intensive project, and our team put a lot of work into really evaluating and identifying and prioritizing just the most critical things that we needed to move forward. So as part of that, the things that stayed in the 5-year budget were projects that are currently under construction. Obviously, we're not going to stop building things that are already under construction. Any water line replacements associated with street projects, we want to make sure that if we've got water lines that are nearing the end of their useful life and we're going to be rebuilding a street, that we replace the water lines at the same time so we're not tearing the streets up 5 years after they're paved in order to replace the water lines. There were critical projects identified from the Integrated Water Resources Master Plan that are addressing existing deficiencies in the system that were really pressing, time sensitive, that needed to be addressed. And then some that are needed to fully utilize the full capacity of the North Water Treatment Plant once it's expanded to the 60 million gallons a day. So the infrastructure, the finished water pump station and some of the pipes that come out of that facility were sized for 45 million gallons a day. So with the increase in capacity there's some increased capacity in the rest of the system that we also have to work towards as we grow into that 60 million gallon a day capacity. And then we have the big one, our water rights and resiliency projects and well drilling acceleration that we'll talk a little bit more about here. And then anything regulatory compliance driven stayed in that 5-year window. The things that we moved out were more large water main replacement projects, Tankersley area, the islands, our asbestos cement pipeline replacement program, anything non-time sensitive from our water master plan, and then other just like optimization type projects that are important for long-term sustainability of our system, but not as time sensitive as some of the other ones. So the 3 main pressures right now on the water fund are our water resource needs, our increasing construction costs from capital improvement plans, and then those new projects from our water master plan that were identified. On the water resources side, Colorado River shortage impacts are significant. They're pressing, increasing the cost of our raw water supply. There's the increased cost for the infrastructure that we need to be able to access groundwater in order to offset and pump out of the ground what we're no longer getting from the cap. And then additional conservation staffing and programs, because long-term pumping of groundwater wells is not the solution. We have to really get residents to a point where they're just using less water, and those increased conservation programs will help us do that. And so this is from last year, that Colorado River was in a tier 1. We're now in a tier 2A. You see the lower it goes, the faster it decreases. And the prognosis at this point is not improving. So we really have to be planning for those significant cuts to the Colorado River supply long-term. 10 years ago, raw water costs were only about 12% of our total operating budget. And we're projecting that as of current DCP projections, it's going to increase to about 25% of our operating costs. So this is a huge pressure on this fund. In terms of the water supply itself, I know that Lauren has shared a lot of this with you in recent meetings as well. But how we meet our demands versus what our available supply is don't really match up. So on the SRP side, the blue part of the pie, we have 40% of our supply that we could meet with that, but because of the North Water Treatment Plant restrictions, we've only used about 34% of it. So the North Water Treatment Plant will allow us to fully utilize that SRP, which will help us reduce the groundwater pumping in that particular area, which will then allow us to temporarily be able to pump more water out of our CAP service area. So the orange pieces of the pie are our groundwater pumping, and that is a combination of what we can safely pump, what we're allowed to pump, as well as what we're recharging into the ground. And we've been storing that water in the ground for a long time for this purpose, but it's also not a long-term sustainable solution to it. But it is absolutely the only option we have for short-term being able to meet the demands in the system. So the challenge is where we have the wells available to pump the water out of the ground. Most of our wells are in zone 1, which is the pink area, which is our SRP service area, which we don't need the pumping capacity in those areas because that area is served by the North Water Treatment Plant. Where we need the capacity is in the blue and the yellow, which is where the CAP water goes from our Santan Vista Water Treatment Plant. We do not have sufficient number of wells in those areas to pump enough groundwater to meet our peak day demands with the reduction in CAP supply that's being projected. So what we're looking at is how do we offset that in the short term, assuming no CAP water, and then in the long term, assuming maybe half of our CAP supply is available to us in the future. And so getting that, getting the additional, blue is again SRP, pink is CAP, and the orange is the wells. So you see short-term CAP is 0. And so we've only got surface water from the SRP system and our groundwater wells triggering stage 3 of our water supply reduction management plan. Adding in short-term 12 million gallons a day of well pumping capacity, and then eventually getting a portion of our CAP supplies back in order to get us back into that, stage 1 and stage 2 of our plan. And then long-term, looking at additional resiliency supplies, which could be additional leases or other sources of water that are not groundwater. Yeah, that's build out. Yeah, the last one is our build out demand. So. And we do have some of those wells programmed into our system development fees. So those are already wells that we're planning on building that are also not part of these rates because we do expect growth to pay for those needs. So we have a short-term 12 million gallon a day gap, a long-term 24 million gallon a day gap, and a 3-year construction timeline for each well that we need to build in order to be able to increase our water production capacity. So what we've done is we had all of these wells already in our capital improvement plan. We just had them spaced out more along in time because based on original projections, we had more time to be able to get them in place in order to plan for the CAP shortages. Those conditions have deteriorated much more quickly than anybody anticipated. So we've been working to reprioritize and accelerate these projects in order to get them in place ideally in time for any shortages that may occur, but likely not going to be able to get them in place that quickly. They may not buffer us from the earliest and deepest shortages on the Colorado River, but they are still needed in the short, medium, and long term for our sustainable operations. But again, pumping groundwater is not the long-term solution to this. We have a set amount of water that we can pump out of the ground every year, and as part of our 100-year assured water supply. And if we pump more than that, then all it does is decrease the amount of water that we have available outside of what we recharge. So for the past, 5 or so years, it's only been recently that we've started pumping more than what we're putting back in. And we really want to preserve, that's what those credits are for. That's what we've been saving them for. But long term, we can't continue to deplete those. And then we get to the end and now suddenly we don't have any more credits and people are having to really conserve water. So it's really about long-term changing that mindset. And ultimately trying to find additional long-term resiliency supplies for sustainability. Those are also not part of this discussion, but just so that you know, they are things that we're looking at and we'll be looking to in the future. But right now, what we're just trying to do is address the immediate needs related to water resources and our ability to meet those demands. So that's the water resources piece of the impacts. And really, as part of this, our goal is always just to make sure that a shortage at the river does not mean a shortage at the tap. Like, we want to make sure that we can always provide our residents the water they need at the tap. Does it mean they may have brown grass? Probably some point in the future, yes. But making sure you've got all the water you need in your home in order to health and safety and cooking and bathing and all those things. That's our goal. So in addition to that, not only do we need all these projects, but now they cost us more because of all of these challenging market conditions that we've talked about at length related to cost escalation and inflation and other pressures. You know, the city of Phoenix metro area has seen some of the highest inflationary cost increases of any large city in the entire country. Supply chain challenges, labor shortages, local factors. We've got Intel, we've got Mayo Clinic, we've got the TSMC. They're all competing for local resources that are driving up our costs. And so what we've been seeing, and we've shown you this graph before as well, over the last few years, a lot of volatility in the market. We are seeing stabilization at this point, so things are more predictable, but they are not recovering back to pre-2020 levels. So we are anticipating more consistency and more predictability in what those costs are going to be. And maybe the inflationary pressures are not going to continue to increase, but they are considerably higher than they were 3 years ago. Anywhere from 22 to 52% increases in projects, depending on the size of the project, the type of the materials that are being used to build the project, et cetera. So, and the biggest one we have is our North Water Treatment Plant. And we shared with you guys in the fall, at the fall retreat, that when we first started this project and we bonded for the project and we set the rates 2 years ago, we had a $457 million project. When we got our 60% cost model update, that had increased to $575 million. We took a pause for several months last summer and underwent an exhaustive value engineering effort where over 200 ideas were captured and evaluated by our engineers and operations groups in order to see what we could reduce from the project cost, but not compromise the overall objective of the project as a whole. And we were able to find about $30 million in savings through that effort, which brought the total project cost for the plant then down to $545 million, which is an inflation of 21.5%, which is very much in line and actually at the lower end of what the averages are that we're seeing. So all the costs associated, the increases here are strictly inflationary pressures, but we couldn't, as part of the value engineering process, we couldn't in good conscience cut anything out to reduce the cost further without compromising the integrity of the project and the overall intent. To spend that much money and then not get everything that we originally intended to did not make sense to us. However, as we shared in the fall, there is now a $90 million gap on this particular project that we are working to address as part of this rate study. The other piece of information that we have now that we are incorporating into this rate study is the outcome of our integrated water resources master plan. And it is an integrated plan. It talks about water resources, compliance, operations, and it's water, wastewater, and reclaimed water. So specifically, we're only looking at the water piece for these rates, but we talked previously with the wastewater that once we had all of the results from that master plan, those were not part of the recent wastewater rates that we did. So we'll be looking to those in the future as well. But we really comprehensively look at the system. We do modeling, we look at our existing assets, we look at the future needs, we look at different scenario plans for resiliency and risk analysis. And then really, and you guys, everybody got to see a demonstration of some of the dashboards and models that we have that were being created from the master plan in the fall, which is something really neat for us. It's a great tool for us to be able to work on and model different scenarios for our operations. But as part of that master plan, we had 38 new projects identified for a total of about $260 million. And just over 100 million of that was specific to water. Some of those are growth related, so they're not part of this. Some of them are optimization. They're also not part of this. So what was deferred outside the 5-year budget is listed on the left. What we included in this 5-year budget with the current rate request is on the right. And those are specific. The North Water Treatment Plant, the first 2 projects are related to being able to fully utilize the North Water Treatment Plant 60 million gallon a day capacity when it's done. One area where there's fire flow improvements that are needed, a condition assessment for our Santan Vista Water Treatment Plant. The first phase of that is 15 years old now, and so we want to be able to get in and start looking at making sure that we don't end up in the same situation with the North Water Treatment Plant where it only made it through 25 or 30 years of its useful life because of poor construction quality and deterioration that was occurring. And so there's just a graphic of a couple of the projects that are being proposed. These are transmission mains for water to be able to better distribute the water out of the North Water Treatment Plant once it's expanded. And then the one fire flow project that we're looking at doing improvements on is up in that northwest corridor, where it's kind of the edges of the system and some improvements need to be made in order to improve the fire flow in that area. So the other thing that the master plan identifies is future growth areas. And I just to kind of share with you that we do look at that, but those are things that are really important in understanding and informing our system development fee studies, which will also be taking place shortly, but are not part of these rates. Just it's not part of these rates. And that is the water. So before I move on to environmental services, I'll pause. Thank you. Okay. So environmental services. So we shared this with you at a recent council meeting regarding the annual benchmarking report. Gilbert residents generate a lot of trash, more trash than our neighbors and more trash than the average across all of our benchmark cities. We also do a very good job at recycling. Those two numbers combined are just a lot of tonnage, and there is a cost associated with collecting and disposing of that tonnage. Our residential trash and recycling line of service, we collected almost 7 million containers last year. That's collecting trash and recycling once a week. Over 86,000 tons of trash and 18,000 tons of recycling. And then on the bulk side, we collected almost 250,000 bulk piles for another almost 18,000 tons, which the bulk trash isn't even part of that other benchmarking data. So we have that in addition to just the contained, what we're collecting in the cans. On the residential side, we also have our household hazardous waste facility that served almost 10,000 vehicles last year and collected 93,000 pounds of e-waste and almost 600,000 pounds of other waste, including paint and other hazardous materials. And then we also have our container maintenance that last year repaired almost 22,000 cans and delivered over 1,100 new containers to homes. And then on the commercial side, it's a much smaller line of service. We have about 700 customers in our commercial collections that collected about 18,000 tons of trash, usually in these 3 and 4 cubic yard dumpsters in little enclosures behind the businesses. And we do also have roll-off services that are used by residents and businesses. And we did almost 4,000 hauls. That's a very popular service for us. And there's usually a wait list. But our residents really love their trash service. So just kind of give you an overview of what those lines of service are. So this is a summary. It's kind of a busy table, but essentially we just wanted to show and compare the different types and lines of service that we provide compared to our surrounding communities. You can see we're down here at the bottom. We are not the lowest rate. of all of the cities. We are the lowest rate of cities that provide open set out bulk, which is basically you just set it out at your scheduled time and then it gets picked up. So we offer 10 bulk trashes a year compared to, for example, City of Phoenix only offers 4, can't even keep up with it right now. And their rate is almost twice as much as ours. On the appointment-based services, Chandler and Peoria do have lower rates than us, but Chandler has kept their rate low. They used to offer 12 bulk pickups a year, and now they're down to 2 because they've just been cutting back on the level of service they're providing in order to keep the rates from having to be increased. So overall, the town of Gilbert and our residential trash service absolutely has the highest level of service at the lowest overall cost between the HHW and all the bulk services that we provide. We really do provide a great value to our residents. And if you remember, when we reduced our bulk service from 12 to 10, they were not happy at all. And all we did was take out a pickup over the holidays because everybody was complaining about, like, I don't want this trash on my street during Christmas, and can we not do this? So that was the only adjustment that we made there. But so we really, really do provide the best value to our residents for what we provide and for the cost that the rate that we charge. Environmental services, same chart, minimum fund balance. Blue line is what's proposed with the rates that we're proposing to move forward with. The orange bar is what happens if we do nothing. So and then same with the commercial. Commercial funds much smaller, but we're also seeing similar pressures that we'll go into in terms of why we're needing to look at the rates in these lines of services. So the main pressures related to this fund are increased volumes and tipping fees. As I shared, we create a lot of trash. Our residents create a lot of trash. They've been creating a lot more trash since COVID, which I'll show you. Repair and maintenance costs on our vehicles, cost escalation, new vehicles. I mean, if you tried to buy a new car recently, like how much more does it cost you now than it did 3 years ago? And then a little bit on the recycling market volatility. That's actually a little bit less of an impact, but we do have some numbers on that as well. This is a lot of information, but on the top right, this is our collected tonnages, 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 22. 2020, COVID, everybody's home. Everybody's ordering more Amazon online. This is a little bit disproportionate. This isn't like a 3 times increase. It's about a 15% increase in the tonnage in that year. The chart starts at 88,000. But we went from like about 95,000 tons a year to 108,000 tons a year in 2020. And it's kind of slowly coming back down, but it's still much higher than our pre-COVID levels. And it's still higher than when we set the last environmental services rates. Well, they were home. I tell you what, I Marie Kondoed my house like crazy, but most of my stuff went to donation centers. Like it wasn't going in the garbage, but yes, had a lot of time on my hands during COVID. But what we're also seeing is our landfill fees. Like we have Waste Management and Republic Services landfills, and our tipping fees, our tonnage fees have gone from between $25 and $30 up to between $27 and $33 a ton. So that's an increased operating cost we have to pay in order to dispose of material. So overall, the trend in landfill fees, we've gone from $2.2 million in 2018 up to $2.9 million last year. So that's just an increased operating cost that is not being accounted for in the rates currently, which is what we're proposing to correct now. Commercial's the same. The tonnage fees are the same regardless of if it's residential or commercial. The one thing you will see is that in 2020, we actually had a decrease in our tonnages on commercial, and that's because of the type of service we provide to our customers. When businesses were closed or had to cut back on their service, we could do that. We said, okay, you don't need to be picked up 4 times. You only need to be picked up 3 or 2, or you want to cancel altogether or pause. Like some of the school districts, we said, okay, we can accommodate that. And so we saw a decrease in our tonnage during that time that has now actually recovered to we've actually grown that line of service somewhat since pre-COVID numbers. We do have some impacts on recycling. You can see on the top left is, well, I'll just stick to this one because this is kind of more relevant. Back in FY12, 10 years ago, recycling commodities earned us money, which allowed us to, in 2012, you saw we reduced our environmental services rate because we had revenue coming in from recycling that allowed us to offset some of our operating costs. In 2018 is when China severely restricted the contamination levels that they would accept. And so we saw a huge hit to the recycling market. And that was the first year that it started costing us money to recycle. And then in 2020, 2021, they had a complete ban. So they don't take our materials at all anymore. What we see in FY22 is we actually got kind of lucky, and through one of our vendors, United Fibers, we're able to have a flat rate recycling cost. So they just charged us per ton, and it didn't matter what the commodity market looked like, which in a poor commodity market is a good thing. But if the commodities and like the cardboard companies are actually wanting to pay money for them, then, you know, you're not seeing that revenue. But it did allow us to be a little more predictable and stable in what our costs were for at least the last year and a half or so. So currently with that flat rate, so trash, the average disposal fee is $33 a ton. Our recycling cost at United Fibers right now is $30 a ton. That contract is ending in May. And so once that contract is up, we will be strictly with Republic Services, and we will be dependent on the commodity market and how much they can resell those recyclables to offset the processing fees that they would charge us. And the commodity market is still quite volatile. We're basing all of our projections for what our recycling is going to cost next year on current market conditions. You can see back to 2019, it's just all over the place. And we did see some recovery, and then it's come back down since then. So our recycling program costs, there's always a question of like, well, why should we continue to recycle if it's going to cost us so much more money? So you still have to dispose of it. If you're not recycling it, you still have to pay to take it to the landfill. The landfill fees are also continuing to increase. So as of right now, we have about 20,000 tons of material that we would need to, on the recycling side, dispose of some way. And if we want to take it to a landfill and don't want to recycle, it's still going to cost us $660,000 in landfill fees to take it to that to those facilities. So versus a recycling cost of about 1.2 million. So there is a $600,000 gap there. This is a $20 million operational fund. So the $600,000 difference is relatively small. It's not insignificant, but it's relatively small. But there are other operational impacts to not recycling that we would also have to account for. Because based on Maricopa County Health Department, if you don't recycle, you have to pick up trash twice a week. And if we have to pick up trash twice a week, then we did the math, and Paul said we probably need like at least 2 more drivers and 2 more trucks, which is at least, I mean, it's $1 million in capital to get the trucks, and then a couple $100,000 a year in staffing. So that gap then becomes even smaller. And the challenge we have is if we're not recycling, we're taking it all to the landfills are getting closer and closer to being full and having to close. The fees for that are going to go up, and then there's going to be significant cost in terms of redeveloping another landfill, finding out where we're going to take our trash. And so that's something that that our ASU students, we're working on our solid waste master plan right now. They're going to be looking at all of those different nuances to the operational impacts that making changes like that have. Recycling may cost more, but it's still by far the most sustainable way to dispose of those materials.
I would think in a town like Gilbert, with all of the garbage that we produce anyway, normally, right? And I know a lot of families already have 2 black cans. If we cut out recycling, some families may need 3 black cans.
Yeah, well, their cans would be getting picked up twice a week, so they could probably still fit it all in the 2 cans, but yes.
You would make Mark Peterson happy. He hates having to do recycling separately, but I make him do it. So this is a Maricopa County, I want to understand you correctly. This is a Maricopa County rule that if we removed recycling, that we would have to do that. And it has to be separate day collection?
Yes.
By their rules?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a health code variance that you get a variance and can do it once a week with both trash and recycling. Or if you remember, we used to have separate day trash and recycling, which is the same thing as picking up twice a week. But then we consolidated into the same day. Yes, but if we had to split it back up, then we were able to offset the need to add staff by consolidating to a single day. If we split it back out, we would have to increase our staffing levels in order to complete that full. So the ultimate gap ends up being, a few $100,000. So it's just then at that point, the sustainability factor and the long-term operation of those landfills and how you dispose of it when those landfills are full. So that's kind of the recycling piece. And then the other piece we have is our repair and maintenance on our vehicles. I think I shared with some of you at maybe our legislative breakfast how we can't even order garbage trucks right now to replace them because there's such a backlog. So when we can't replace our old vehicles, the maintenance on our existing vehicles increases. Not only that, but you've got just inflationary costs on parts and supplies that are affecting every other line of service and area that we maintain. We're seeing substantial increases in the repair and maintenance of our vehicles in order to keep them running. And commercial, we had, again, you see the decrease because we were actually running, we replaced a couple of trucks and then we were running less trucks because we had less customers, and now you're starting to see it come back up as well. Then parts and supplies, the same thing. We saw a huge increase. We are seeing a little bit of a decrease. I think that's because we can't get the parts and supplies to even repair the trucks, so we're not spending the money. It's very difficult. And Paul and his team and our fleet team are doing everything they can to keep these trucks running. But if you hear more complaints about hydraulic leaks and things in neighborhoods, that's kind of a side effect of
Well, and hopefully we don't have more truck fires because that causes a whole.
that definitely doesn't help
takes
either.
the whole truck out of commission. Yeah.
Yes. Which then also puts more strain on our existing vehicles. We can't take them down for maintenance because we need to have a certain number of vehicles each day. Yes.
Just as an aside, when you're talking about repairs, have you looked at acquiring a 3D printer for some of the hard parts? And I say that because I own two, so I'm just saying.
Have not, but what we are doing is going and refurbishing instead of replacing. So we're taking our vehicles that are otherwise ready to be replaced, and because we can't replace them, we're sending them to our vendors. There's one vendor that does the garbage truck body, that has the compactor and the arm and all that, and then there's another vendor that does the chassis with the cab and that carries the truck. The body goes to one place, the chassis goes to another place. They're each refurbing their pieces, and then we put it back together. We've got one out right now. It's the first time we're trying it for about the third of a cost of replacing the vehicle, but we'll get hopefully a few more years out of each truck. Tucson did it and has had success so far. So we wanted to get in the queue because as more people can't purchase trucks, the concept of refurbishing is then there's probably going to be a wait list for that. And, we may have trouble going down that avenue as well, but we're doing everything we can to extend the useful life of our existing vehicles as much as possible. We are also, in terms of addressing escalating costs, like I said, we're working with ASU. Council recently approved an IGA with ASU to do a solid waste master plan to look at not only our current operations, but future creative ways to address rising costs and recycling and trash disposal and all the things. And we are all also working with the city of Mesa. You will likely at the beginning of next fiscal year see an IGA with them to do a study to look at a municipal recycling facility that would take away, it would be operated then by municipal as opposed to relying on the private sector for the recycling, processing fees, all those things. So they're looking at doing it regardless. They're looking at a recycling facility and transfer station. They asked us if we were interested in at least looking at a study to see, it helps from an efficiency standpoint for them to kind of maximize the capacity of a facility. And we had, a good relationship with them in other areas, and also facing the same recycling challenges. So we're working towards just doing a study to see what the cost would be if we wanted to participate, and how that compares to the private market.
Would Jessica, and I know you'll probably come back with more info on that, with thoughts on that though, would it mean that we would have to recycle the same items that Mesa recycles? Do you think potentially? Any idea?
I don't think so,
No?
but I mean, I don't know that I don't know that we would get a break if the cost was different, if we
It
said,
might
we
be
still don't
easier.
take glass, that's not a,
That's a big thing with our residents. I think we have a lot of drinkers in Gilbert. Just a lot of
oh, my family still
lot of
puts glass in the
bottles making
recycle
their way
can, and
to
I
the
say we don't
garbage now.
recycle glass anymore, but yes. I know.
A lot of glass bottles. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, just, it was just the first thing that popped into my mind. Like, would we have to do the same thing Mesa's doing? Would it be able to be different?
Yeah, there may or may not be an occasional wine bottle in my garbage can. Can you really blame us? No. So that's kind of a recap on the environmental services piece. So the last slide I have is just kind of the process steps and the timeline for what we're recommending to move forward, and then getting council thoughts and questions on that. So we're briefing council right now at our financial retreat on our rate pressures and needs, looking at doing a rate study over the summer. And then bringing that back to council with a notice of intent in August, and then notification and everything of the residents and the open houses through the fall for adoption of the rates actually at the end of this calendar year. I know. The earlier we can implement the rates, the lower the impact will be. So we can certainly look at multiple timelines as part of the rate study and what that difference is, or phasing of the implementation to provide some options. We do have kind of a dollar amount that we need, and how we get that is we may have some ability there to look at some different options. And that's it. Questions?
There's your screen, folks. Today's ask: provide direction on completion of the rate study and timing of rate implementation.
They're my cheerleading moral support team over there, so. All right. So yes, we are going to talk about the schedule for utility rate reviews. Just as a little bit of a background information for those of you that were not on council at the time, back in 2021 at the finance retreat, we were doing a review of the water environmental services, trash and recycling, solid waste rates for implementation in FY 21-22, and shared with council we were going to be coming back the following year, which was 22, to talk about wastewater environmental compliance, and that we were directed each year, bring back 2, and we'll review them on that kind of a rotating regular basis, with the goal of kind of smoothing out the impact to residents and not waiting too long and doing all of them all at once and then having significantly larger increases. So I already showed this slide in the last presentation, but just wanted to recap it. We're kind of trying to get away from these large gaps of not doing any increases and then having to see significantly larger increases all at once, creating a bigger impact. And so, we saw in 22, we did water and trash and recycling. In 23, we did wastewater environmental compliance. Came to you today to talk about water and trash and recycling again, with the intent of then next year coming back and continuing on that alternating schedule every other year. When you look at what that means, see, in the early 2000s, we had gradual increases, 5, 6, 7% in each of the different lines of service each year. And it was kind of just a smooth curve. And then we had this flattening where we didn't see anything for an extended period of time. And then it jumps up, and then it's flat, and then it jumps up a lot. And that's just a result of a few different things. 1, not doing an increase for an extended period of time. 2, during this period here, 2014, 2015, 2016, we started really developing our long-range infrastructure plans and really identifying what the needs were going to be for those funds and started trying to incorporate them into our rates. So you started to see the increased need for those funding for those different programs and initiatives. When you look at the utility bills from 2009, which was kind of when we stopped doing increases initially and had a big gap, our bill was very flat. And when you compare that to the CPI, the red line is bill adjusted CPI, the blue line is our actual bill. And so over that 14 years, we're still below the inflationary rate for our increases that we've seen over the last 14 years. We're just doing them in bigger chunks at this point, which is what we want to try to mitigate. So one of the things that we always have to consider when we're doing the rates is we have a lot of different studies and plans that we try to time and coordinate in order to be able to incorporate the information that we find out from those plans into our rate needs. So for example, we just completed our Integrated Water Resources Master Plan. As a result of that, we have a lot of projects from that master plan built into what we just requested on the water side. But because we just adopted the wastewater ones, we didn't have the results of that. So we're going to be catching those master plan projects in the next wastewater study. We have our system development fees. We have the master plans get done to time with the system development fee studies because those are more time intensive and have a longer like statutory timeline requirement for implementation. So we want to make sure that we've got as much information as we can. So we're trying to balance the timing of the rate studies with the timing of all these other plans and studies that we're doing. And some of these studies, like our master plans, are only done every 5 years. Our SDF studies only done every 5 years. They take anywhere from 18 to 24 months to complete. So at some point it's pencils down and we have to move forward with the information we have available. We always want to try to have as much information available as we can so that we're as caught up as possible. But so when we talk about the rates, the more frequently we can do them, the better chance we have of catching this data as opposed to having the timing be off and not completing a study and then not being able to capture that in the rates. And so really, that's just kind of a summary of where we were at, why we got to the alternating schedule that we are currently on, and just wanted to have a discussion and question and see if there's any other options that you want to explore. We look at everything in the needs every single year as part of our budget. We update the 5-year plans, and it's just a matter of, at this point, every time we look at it and every time we update it, we're seeing a need for additional revenue over time as inflation hopefully slows down a little bit and we catch up to all of these extenuating circumstances. We can see a little bit of leveling if we maintain that alternating schedule, but definitely open to discussion if there's an alternate approach that you'd like to consider.
Sorry, I moved my.
You'll plan, what am I going to do with this paycheck? And you'll plan, what am I going to do this year, the projects that are going to happen, which is kind of more of a medium time frame. And then you'll also say, what am I going to do through retirement? How am I going to be prepared for the long term? So we do the same types of things in the town. We say, what are we going to do with the money for next year, the immediate term? And that's in great detail. We know what each dollar goes to, where all of the budget requests are, which department's getting how much money. And then we'll do, what are we going to do in a more medium term time period? We call that our 5-year plan. And so like our general fund will look out 5 years. What are the big projects we know that are coming up that we need to save for and prepare for? And that's in a medium amount of detail. And then this is our long-term plan. And so it's in less detail, but it's more like retirement planning. What are we doing over the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years? So this one we've got going out to 2039. And it's what are the big trends that are we on a good path for the large trends that are happening? So in this model, we take the actuals from last year, our personnel budgeting, our expense budgeting, capital, all of the transfers, all of those types of things, and say, if the patterns that we currently have happening in the town, if they continue on a longer period of time, where will that take us? Where will our revenues be? Where will our expenditures be? And this is just for the general fund only. So this is not water or wastewater. Those do their 5-year plans and some other. This is just the general fund. So in here, we try and give just different options and flexibility that we can look at. So what I've got turned on right now is, I guess, probably green line up at the top is revenue, and then the stacked bars are the different types of expenditure. Purple are associated with our personnel costs, green are our operating, red is our capital, and then the blue are transfers, like transfer to pay off debt early. So just transfers to the other funds, some of that's happening, paying debt or paying early. Some of the transfer, we've got one for water SDF because it needs a little support. So any of that type of stuff. So you can see personnel is the bulk of our budget, and that's why small changes in our personnel numbers can make a big difference over time. And we've got in here the potential loss of revenue for our food tax and potential loss for residential rental, because those are in flux at the legislature. And so that's kind of what we're building next year's budget off of, just to be prepared. So if we have those, or if we say, what if we say, I guess it's residential rental, was vetoed at the legislature. So if we include, are able to have the residential rental stay, it does give us some more flexibility into the future. If we say that we also get to keep our food tax, then it helps us have a better picture more long-term. But that's assuming that there's not a recession. If we assume, what if there is a hard recession that comes, this is assuming a $20 million loss. Great Recession in 2008 was about 18% of our sales tax, which was about 10 million at that period of time. If it were something as hard or as deep as that, we would need to be prepared for about $26 million loss. So this isn't even as hard as the 2008. But if we include that, then our revenues come back down. If we have a recession and we also lose our residential rental and we lose our food tax, maybe not this year, but in the next couple of years, then you can see that that starts to create some deficit long-term and things that we would need to look at. So we kind of try and keep that balance, and this helps us watch our one-time and our ongoing revenues. That's why we watch them so closely, because if we get to keep our food tax, but there's not a recession or a deep recession, then we could have some one-time money in the next couple of years to work on some things. So we could look at cash funding some infrastructure, whether this is some police infrastructure, some park infrastructure. We could look at doing some of that and be able to put some money in for there. Or during the time period where we have some additional one-time money, we could say we're going to do some ASRS pre-funding that we had talked about earlier today. This one looks at $10 million in fiscal 24 and 25 each. So we could look at including some additional one-time money in that period of time. So I just once a year will work with Patrick and we walk through and say, you know, what are some of the big decisions that are happening and how does that help us look long-term for Gilbert? And then we bring it here to the council so that you can see as well how those trends are impacting us, or ask some questions about financial security or revenues and expenditures in the long term for Gilbert. Did I cover everything? We're doing good now. It is a precarious balance because sales tax is so volatile. It can change without notice, but we do our best to prepare.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. So you can see there's a number of variables that we're constantly evaluating to understand what that impact may be to us, so we don't get caught off guard, as well as, have informed conversations with our local delegation when they're considering things at the state legislature, what that means for us locally. And I think it's one of the things that I'm most proud of our team and Kelly and all of our staff. We do a tremendous amount of forward-looking planning, whether it be assessment studies on infrastructure, long-range infrastructure plans, scenarios based on revenue expenditure forecasts. We have staffing models that we look at, that we test against need versus what we projected each year, to just really try to validate what we're doing as much as possible to make the best decision possible with what are really very scarce resources to meet the needs of a growing community as well as a community reaching build out. And when we do find ourselves in years with surplus, we try to use those dollars in the smartest way possible, or advise you to use those dollars in the smartest way possible to pay for infrastructure, to pay down pension liabilities, whatever that may be. But we never anticipate coming into each year with a surplus. We anticipate really understanding the potential risk that we perceive over the next 12 months and budget ourselves accordingly. As opposed to, there are some cities that will push revenues to justify the expenditures they want to make. And that's just a very risky place to put yourself in.
Comments, questions for Kelly? Oh, yeah.